All right, tonight we're down in chapter 21 of the Gospel of John, which means we're down to our last class. Now, as we are studying chapter 21, I think the first thing to ask is, why would there be a chapter 21? Why did John go ahead and add that chapter? Because he has come to the conclusion here in chapter 20, and he came down to a perfect conclusion, as you can see there in verse 30 and 31. And he's saying, now many other signs he did, and I could tell you about them, but I have told you this, that you may believe. And so he has come to an absolute perfect conclusion to his gospel. But then, in addition to that, he now then starts out again, and he said, now after these things, Jesus manifested, and now then he's going to give us another appearance that Jesus has here. So we'd say, why did he add chapter 21? Well, there's two ways you can find out. That is, if he tells you, which he doesn't, or if you read chapter 21 and see what he does, then you can say, well, that is the reason that he added that. Now, if I were to, let's suppose, call Steve, and he's getting ready to go on a big trip over to Hawaii. And so I tell him, now, Steve, when you get over there, I want you to go over here, and I want you to go over there, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do that, and now don't forget to do this and do that, and bang, bang, bang. And then I say, now, there's many other things I could tell you, Steve, for you to do, but do these, and this is enough. I mean, this is enough. That really is what John has said. Now, I hang up the phone. Goodbye, Steve. Hang up the phone. I've given him all the instructions that I wanted to give him, and come to a perfect conclusion, told him bye, and then later I call him back. Well, why would I call him back? Well, suppose that I call him back, and I say, oh, Steve, I wanted to tell you that I saw Jim Putterball today. And in addition to that, I want to tell you that I saw another one of our friends back in Illinois, and he's about to die. See you, Steve. Hang up the phone. Now, anybody got any idea why I called Steve the second time? It was to tell him those two things, right? Now, as you study chapter 21, after John has come to his conclusion, and remember his purpose of writing this book was to give them the information so that they would have ample information for believing that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of God, that God, deity, actually came from heaven down to earth in the form of Jesus Christ. And he lived here, and then he went back. That is his purpose, and that's what he showed them. Now then, tonight, he is going to add a couple other things. And he's going to tell us about an appearance that Jesus made. He said, now, in addition to what I've told you, here's what Jesus did to his disciples. And then, after he gets through with that, he's going to tell them that Jesus had Peter restored. Remember the last time we'd heard about Peter, how he had denied Jesus and 3 times, and now then he's going to show us now Peter is restored back into the good graces of Jesus, and Peter's going to die a horrible death. Goodbye. And that's what he's going to tell us in this particular chapter. So let's start out and let's now take a look at it. Now, in order for us to do justice to this, let's start back, and I want us to look at the appearances that Jesus made. Now, here's a picture of a tomb. It's just a normal way that a body would be laid in there on those slabs that have been cut out. And when they came to Jesus' tomb, it was empty. Jesus rose from the dead. Now then, we're told in Acts the 1st chapter, it said, and to whom he showed himself alive after his passion by many proofs, appearing to them by the space of 40 days. Now, we're going to talk here tonight about the appearances that Jesus made that would fall in this category, that he showed his disciples that he was alive. Now, remember, after Jesus died and rose from the dead and went out, he didn't preach anymore about the kingdom to the heathen, to the unbelievers. He only spoke to the believers, the followers, the disciples that he had following him. And his purpose in speaking to them was to show them, I am the same man that died. And he did this for a period of 40 days so that they would be sure that it was really Jesus and it wasn't somebody that just looked like Jesus. So he didn't just spend 2 days, 3 days, or a week in going around and showing himself to a half dozen people, but we want to see how many people he showed himself to that had the opportunity to examine him and see, yes, this is Jesus, the same man that died and that was buried. So we're going tonight to be talking about this, and he's going to give us a little bit of information there. So now let's go through the appearances, and we're going to go through them rapidly because we're going to take it down to where we are tonight. Now, last week we studied these appearances. Number one, Jesus appeared to Mary at the tomb. Number two, then, after he appeared to her at the tomb, then he appeared to all the women that had run to the tomb. So that was his second appearance that he made. Now his third appearance is that he appeared to the two men walking on the road to Emmaus. He came and joined them, went home, and had supper with them. In his fourth appearance then, he appeared to Peter. Now, he appeared to Peter, and we know this because in Luke 24, verse 34, why it said he appeared to Peter. And in 1 Corinthians 15:5, it said he appeared to Peter. Now, I say that because that's all we know. We don't know when or where or what they did, but he did appear to Peter then in his fourth appearance. Now, in the fifth appearance, Jesus appeared to his 10 disciples. Remember, we studied that last week. This is when they were in the upper room. Thomas was not there. And Jesus just miraculously appeared in the room and talked to the 10. In his sixth appearance, it was 8 days later, and then Jesus came back to the same room, only this time Thomas was there, so he appeared then to the 11 at that time. So that is where we got down to this last time, and going through chapter 20, before we came to the conclusion of chapter 20. Now then, tonight, the seventh appearance is going to be when he appeared to his 11 disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. All right, now I want us to remember, do you remember what he told Mary to tell the disciples when he appeared there to her? You go and tell them that you've seen me, and they are supposed to meet me where? In Galilee. See, they're supposed to go to Galilee. All right, now they have gone to Galilee, his disciples. And now Jesus is going to appear to them there. So now that's how we're going to start out right here in chapter 21, where it says he manifested himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias or at the Sea of Galilee. Now, this is where we're going to study the miraculous drought of fish, how that he had them to catch all these fish. Now, before we go any farther, I want us to note when we get down to verse 14, it's going to say, now this is the third time that Jesus was manifested to the disciples. Now, how many appearances do I have up there? This is the seventh appearance of Jesus. But it's only the third appearance to what? To his disciples. See? To his apostles. What was the first appearance? When he showed up in the room and Thomas was not there. 8 days later, when he showed up in the room and Thomas was there. Now this will be the third time that he's going to appear to all of his apostles. All right, with that behind us now, let's go ahead and let's read in here and see about this particular appearance now. Now, after these things, Jesus manifested himself or made himself known to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. And he manifested himself on this wise. He said, here's how it was done. Now, there were together Simon Peter and Thomas, called Didymus, and Nathanael of Cana of Galilee, and the two sons of Zebedee, and two other of his disciples. Simon Peter saith unto them, I go fishing. They say unto him, we also come with thee. They went therefore and entered into the boat. That night they took nothing. Now, keep in mind, the disciples have been told by Mary and by Jesus before that go to Galilee. I will meet you in Galilee. So they've done that. They've gone back up to Galilee. They don't know where Jesus is. Since he raised from the dead, they went through all of that shock. Mary has seen him. The women have seen him. Two men on the road to Emmaus have seen him. Peter has seen him. 10 of the disciples have seen him. 11 of the disciples have seen him. And he's disappeared. So, they go to Galilee. When they get back up to Galilee, they're going to do what is a normal thing to do. What were they doing in Galilee before Jesus called them? They were fishing, weren't they? Okay. Suppose that I called Oliver right now and to follow me, call some other people, and so I take them out. Oliver leaves his jewelry business and his pottery that's out there. So I take them around for 3 years, and finally this thing happens that I disappear. And I tell Oliver, send word to him, I will see you back in Monroe. And I'm gone. So Oliver, his friends, come back to Monroe. What do you suppose Oliver might accidentally do? He's here. He doesn't know when I'm going to come back. I may wait for 3 months. He has no idea. So I'll just bet you that he would say, well, you know, I'm going to go do a little jewelry business out here in my shop. I'll do a little pottery work out here. Now, the disciples, they had their boats on the Sea of Galilee. That was their office. That was where they worked. So Peter said, well, I'm going to go fishing. They said, well, we'll go with you. And it said they didn't catch anything that night. Now, on the Sea of Galilee, your professional fishermen generally fished at night. That's when they could catch the fish were out, they could catch the fish, and they would bring them in then in the morning and sell them up on the shore then of the Sea of Galilee. So they went out there, and it said they went forth and entered into the boat. That night they took nothing. But when day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach, yet the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. Now, being on a lake like this, generally a little fog around there, they're out, they're out 100 yards in the sea. They look up, they don't recognize Jesus just at daybreak, just as it's breaking day. It said in here, but he stood there, and Jesus therefore said unto them, children, now the word for children is not the word for little children. The Greek had two words. They had a word meaning little children. Then they had the word meaning boys or girls. Now, that would be from this age up. You could call anybody like that. I might go out here on a work day, and everybody's out here in the parking lot working. I'd say, hey, boys, come on in. Well, I'm not talking about little boys, you see. And that's the word that Jesus uses. So, hey, fellas. So he yells out and he asks them, and he said, have you anything to eat? That means that he's a customer, and if they've got something to eat, they can yell back, and we can make a little money here. We can sell this guy some fish. They answered, no. Just one word. They're kind of disgusted. They've been fishing all night. they haven't made one penny. And he said unto them, Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and ye shall find. Now, McGarvey tells us, and he's pretty reliable on just about everything there is. That he's really, I haven't caught him in any mistakes. He's real reliable. He said that there are times when the water's right and the fish are right, that you can stand on the bank and you look out into the Sea of Galilee and you can see fish moving. And so when he said, cast it over here, why the disciples probably thought, well, he sees some fish over here. And so they would cast it over. Otherwise, the only reason I tell you this is, probably if these professional preachers have been, fishermen have been preaching all night, got them mixed up, you're going to make preachers out of them. They've been fishing all night, and he said, cast it on the other side. They'll probably say, we fished all we're going to fish. Mister, we've seen it. But they had some reason to cast it over. They didn't know it was the Lord yet at this time. So they cast it over on the other side then. And it said, they cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it in for the multitude of the fishes. All of a sudden, they had this net, and when they pulled it up, instead of having 3 or 4 fish in it, why, they weren't able to pull it up. It was just filled full of fish. Well, immediately John in here, in verse 7, that disciple therefore whom Jesus loved, that's John. Now this is kind of significant. It came to John's mind immediately, this is Jesus. If you remember, who was the first one that believed that he was actually raised from the dead? It was John, wasn't it? When John saw that empty tomb, John then realized he's been telling us this, and yeah, I believe he's raised from the dead. So I guess we could say John kind of stood head and shoulders above the other disciples in really believing, without any problem whatsoever, that Jesus raised from the dead. The others, they had a problem. They wouldn't believe the women when they were told. So they're there, and it says now, then that disciple whom Jesus loved saith unto Peter, it is the Lord. I just expect that when they saw that net totally full, they probably thought of another event just like that. You remember what that other event was? That one time Jesus told them to cast the net out, and they hadn't caught any fish. They said, go ahead and cast it. And they caught so many fish, it started tearing the net. And they had to call another boat in, and both of the boats were loaded up, and they brought it in, back in Luke chapter 5. So this happened back at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And that's the time of when these fishermen left their boats and started following Jesus then. So that's been about 2.5 years ago. Now then, all of a sudden, the same thing is happening. Here's Jesus, cast it over here. They cast it, pull it up, and it's totally full. And it comes to John's mind, and John looks at Peter and says, it's the Lord. So when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girded his coat about him, for he was naked. Now this means his coat would be his outer garment. He had taken on his outer garment. He had on what I guess we would say his underclothes, underwear, that he's out there and he's working in. So he has enough respect now for Jesus. He's going to be jumping into the water, but he puts on his coat before he jumps in to go up to see Jesus. So he throws on his coat then and cast himself into the sea, threw himself in. He dived into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 200 cubits off. That's about 100 yards, the length of a football field. So they were dragging that net in that's there, that's full of fish. That's there. So they were dragging the net. So when they got out upon the land, they see a fire of coals there, and fish laid thereon, or that is the word really for a single fish. There was one fish on it. Now, all of a sudden they see Jesus wasn't asking them to bring in a fish for him to eat. He's already got the fire built. He's already cooking his fish. But now, he tells them, he said, bring in the fish. This is going to impress them before he tells them anything else. So, bring in the fish. So when they got out of the land, they see a fire thereon and so forth. And Jesus said, bring the fish which ye have now taken. Simon Peter therefore went up and drew the net to the land, full of great fishes. Now he's already wet, so he'd run out there, run in the water, pull the fish out there, these big fish, and 153 fish. And for all that were so many, the net was not rent or torn. So they would expect, if you have that many fish in this little fragile net, that it would be all torn up. Now, these were professional fishermen, weren't they? See, they know what a net would hold and what it wouldn't hold. And they were just amazed. And so this is something that was always on their mind. The net wasn't even broken, but they had these 153 fish in there. Now Jesus saith unto them, come and break your fast. Now if you ever wonder where the word breakfast came from, breakfast means break your fast, is what it means. When you fast, it means you miss a meal. Now you can fast for one meal, you can fast for 1 day, or for 40 days. But a fast means that you miss a meal. So you eat your 3 meals a day, and then at night you're sleeping, and you miss that midnight meal. So you fast all night. In the morning, you get up, and you eat break your fast. It's what you eat. That's where the word breakfast comes from. So he tells them, he said, go ahead, break your fast, go ahead and eat your breakfast, is what he's telling them to do there. And none of the disciples just inquire of him, who art thou? That's kind of interesting they bring up this question, because what have they been talking about all the time up to now? What has been on their mind since he raised from the dead? Is that really him? Is that really him? I won't believe it. Is that? And so that's what they've been talking about. But now then, they're not about to raise this question and say anymore, who art thou? Because they now know it was the Lord. All right, now they're getting ready here to eat the breakfast. Jesus cometh and taketh the bread and giveth them, and the fish likewise. So he serves them breakfast. This is now the third time that Jesus was manifested to the disciples after he was risen from the dead. So there's that verse that I've already talked about. So this is the third time the disciples have seen him then. All right, now at this meeting, so when they had broken the fast, when they had eaten their breakfast, Jesus saith to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, lovest me more than all of these? What a question would come up. You remember the last conversation before Jesus died that he and Peter had, and what Peter told him? And when he said that some people, are going to run away from him, and Peter tells them, I will never do it, I will die for you. And then he tells them, even if all these guys leave you, I'll not forsake you, I'll not deny you. See? Now, Jesus is asking, Peter, do you love me more than all these? He's taking Peter back to that time when he bragged. So, do you love me more than these? And he saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. His bragging attitude is gone. Now, in the Greek, there are 2 words for love. There's one word that's called the princely, greatest degree of love. And that is the agapao that you've heard. That means that you always act in the best interest of whatever you love. And this is where you're commanded. God commands us. You love your neighbor as yourself. You love your enemies, just like God loves his enemies. Now, I can love my enemies by always doing what is the very best for my enemies. It is a love that is not built on emotion. It's a love that's built on intellect, something that I realize is my responsibility, and so I'm going to do it. So that's the ultimate type of love. Now there's another love. The other love is built on emotions. It's built on something that you see in the other person. Of course, the greatest love, what happens when a mother sees her little baby when it's born and takes it in her arm? What does she do? How long does it take her to learn to love that child? See? It's just a natural thing, an affection that's drawn out because of a relationship. Husband and wives can fall in love. I remember how long it took me to fall in love with Helen. I don't think I've ever told this publicly, but it was that long. Is how long it took me. I had seen her, of course, many times before my wife died, but afterwards, then, to the place, and I saw her, and wow, I'm going to marry that woman. So you say love at first sight. Well, it happened to be like that. There's no doubt about it. Now, you take somebody like Pam falling in love with Steve, it probably took 10 years. She'd have to get to know him, and man, can I love this guy? And you see, and you do something like this. But in other words, what I'm trying to say is that finally, Pam got enough affection for Steve that she decided she would love him. This kind of love is built on affection that is there. Now, when Jesus asked Peter, he said, Peter, do you love me, this agapao? And Peter didn't come back, more than all these, he didn't come back and say, yes, I did. He said, Lord, you know that I phileo you. I have this, you know that I have this emotional attachment to you, that I'm dearly, dearly emotionally attached to you. And Peter said, feed my lambs. Then he looked at him a second time and he said, Peter, do you love me? And he uses this same question, same word. And Peter looked and, Lord, you know that I phileo you. And Peter uses the same word. Jesus saying, Peter, do you have this absolute, total love for me? Where Peter said, you know that I have this emotional love for you. He said, feed my sheep again. Then he comes back the third time, and this time Jesus changes the word. Jesus said, Peter, do you phileo me? Now that's the word Peter's been using. In other words, what he says is, Peter, do you even have that love for me? Can you say that you have grown to that extent that you have that attachment, that love, you see, that's there? And Peter said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. How many times did Peter deny Jesus? And now then, Jesus is having him to confess him on these 3 occasions. So then he tells him, shepherd my sheep. Now, this time. Now then we're down to, let's see, I'm getting right here because I'm just talking right there. Down to verse 18. He said, verily, verily, I say unto you. Now, this is where Jesus is talking to Peter here. Let's see. I want to make sure here that I'm not missing something right in here. He saith unto him the third time, loves thou me. Jesus saith unto him, feed my sheep. Okay. He said, verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou was young, you girded yourself, that is, you dressed yourself, you put on whatever clothing you wanted to wear. You girded yourself and walkest whither thou wouldest. So when you're a young man, you put on your clothes and you went wherever you wanted to go. There. He said, but when thou shalt be old, now when you get to be an old man, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee and carry thee whither thou wouldest not. So when you get old, some other people are going to dress you the way they want to, and they're going to stretch forth your hands, which is not good, and they're going to take you where you don't want to go. So Peter wondering, what are we talking about? Verse 19, now this he spake, signifying by what manner of death he should glorify God. So Jesus now is telling Peter how he's going to glorify God in his death. He's going to tell him, Peter, you're going to live to be an old man, and then you're going to die a violent death. People are going to capture you. They're going to stretch forth your hands. They're going to take you where you don't want to go. You're going to die a violent death. That really is what he's saying there. Now, you remember when Peter wrote his book that he talked about that he knew that the time was come when his tabernacle, he was going to be taking off his tabernacle as the Lord had told him. So he's an old man at this time. Now, tradition tells us, and we don't know whether this is true or not, tradition tells us that Peter went to Rome and they caught Peter and they were going to crucify him. So they arrested him, going to crucify him, and he requested to be crucified upside down because he was not worthy to die the same way his Lord did. So that's the way tradition tells us that Peter died. But we don't know. But we do know that he died this violent death. And when he had spoken this, so after he had told Peter this, he saith unto him, follow me. Now here's an interesting story. As soon as he tells him this, Jesus looks at Peter. Now here you got your 11 apostles there. He said, follow me. Jesus takes off, and Peter starts following Jesus. As he's following him, Peter turns around and looks back. And he saw John. John left the other group, and John started following along behind them. So Peter, turning about, seeing the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also leaned on his breast at the supper and said, Lord, who is that betrayeth thee? Peter, therefore, seeing him, saith to Jesus, Lord, and what shall this man do? Now, you told me how I'll die. Lord, what's going to happen to John? How will John die? And Jesus' answer is somewhat like he gave them in Acts, the first chapter, when they asked him, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? He said, that's not for you to know. I'll take care of things like that. So here it is. How will this man die? Then, and Jesus saith unto him, if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? Follow me. You follow me. So it's a rebuke to Peter. Peter, how and when John will die is none of your business. If I want him to live until I come back again, what is that to you? You follow me. That's Peter's job. He's boiling it down. You follow me. So Peter got his answer. Then in verse 23, we see a very interesting thing. In today's culture, do we ever have gossip? Do we ever have things that get turned around, stories that constantly get turned around in there? I hear stories about me all the time. No more truth to them than the man in the moon. Yeah. The last one I heard last week, a person down at Kirkland, Helen and I ran into her, saw her, And she said, Lowell said, now, you and Roy Raines are in the real estate business, right? I mean, you and Cal Winston are in real estate. No. Well, I thought you and Cal had gone into real estate. No. Well, what are you doing? I'm preaching. You're preaching? Yeah, that's what I've been doing all my life. Well, I heard that you and Cal had gone into real estate. No. That's the last one. But it's constant. People making statements and people misunderstanding. And it's down to the point to where it's hard to believe anything that you hear. It really is. Really is. Now, this went on back there at that time too. Look at how this got twisted. Either Peter misunderstood Jesus, or the disciples misunderstood Peter. Because it says, this saying therefore went forth among the brethren, that disciple should not die, that is, that John should not die. Yet Jesus did not say unto him that he should not die, but if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to you? So Jesus didn't say he wouldn't die. Jesus said, if I don't want him to die until I come, what business is that to you? But it got turned around, and years and years later, when John was writing his book here, which is way down at the end of the first century, he said this story was still going about that is in there. So he's straightening up that rumor and stating that rumor is false. That is not what Jesus said. By the way, in the Mormon Church, you know, they claim that the kingdom didn't come until 1914. You know, that's when the kingdom came. And they are talking in different ways that the kingdom still hasn't come, but it's going to come. They've set different dates, but all that is beside the point. In Mark 9:1, Jesus told his disciples that some of you will not die until you see the kingdom come with power. So he told his disciples, his apostles, some of you, one or more, will not die till you see the kingdom come with power. Now the fact of the case is that the kingdom did come with power, you know, about a year later. It came with power. But now, if Jesus told the truth, and if the Mormons are telling the truth, that the kingdom hasn't come yet, or it came in 1914, some of those disciples had to be alive, right? And they will go to this verse and tell you, yeah, that's right. And you see, Jesus prophesied and said John wouldn't die, so John is still alive. And when you ask, you say, well, could we see him? I mean, here it is, he's 2,000 years old. Could we see him? Nobody knows where he is, but he's still alive. So this rumor is really still going even today. You see that is in there. Now, he goes ahead and he said, now this is the disciple. Now he's closing off again. He's talking about himself now, the author here. This is the disciple, me, John, that beareth witness of these things, and wrote these things, and we know that his witness is true. Absolutely no doubt. I have seen it with my own eyes. I know that this witness is true in here. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written, every one, I suppose that even the world would not contain the books that should be written. So with that, he said, I could still go on and on and on. And if I told you everything, I suppose the world wouldn't contain everything. And with that, John closes his book then. So chapter 21 is kind of a unique chapter that is there. It has a purpose to tell us those things we talked about. Now, before we close, that's where the book of John closes. Tonight, we have studied up here the seventh appearance, which is the appearance at the Sea of Galilee where he brought in the fish. Now then, let's look at the other appearances that Jesus had after this happened. Now, we're going to look at 8 through 13. There were 13 different appearances that Jesus had in all of this. So now then the next one, chapter 8. The appearance there is that Jesus appeared to 500 disciples at one time. Now, we don't read about this appearance in the gospel, but we do in 1 Corinthians. It said, and he appeared unto Cephas, that's Peter, then to the 12, then he appeared to above 500 brethren at once. And Paul said, of whom the greater part remain until now. In other words, when Paul was writing his book, the Corinthian book, in 62 AD, he said, most of these 500 people are still alive. Okay? That we have here as witnesses. So he appeared to 500 at one time. Now he's appeared to one woman, he's appeared to several women, he's appeared to one apostle, Peter, he's appeared to 2 disciples who were not apostles, he's appeared to 10 apostles, he's appeared to 11 apostles, he's appeared up in Galilee to the 11 apostles up there, and now then he's appeared to above 500 at one time. In his 9th appearance, he appeared to James. And again, the Gospels doesn't tell us about this, but Paul does. And he says, then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. So now then, he appeared to these that I talked about, and then he appeared to James. 10th, he appeared to all his disciples again. Now this is recorded in Acts, the 1st chapter. There he has his disciples together, his apostles together, and remember he told them, now don't you leave Jerusalem until the Holy Spirit comes upon you, see? And so he's telling them these things in there. So he's got them all together that is in there. That's when he gives them the Great Commission, and he tells them, you shall receive the power and the Holy Spirit comes upon you. So now, the 11th appearance that he makes is to all of his disciples again, his apostles, and this would be when he ascended into heaven. In Luke 24, it tells about this, but in Acts 1, again verse 9, there you read it. And when he had said these things, as they were looking up, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. They went back to Jerusalem. So out on Mount Olivet, there's where Jesus appeared to all of his apostles, and they watched him as he went on up. So now then, Jesus has disappeared from earth. He's gone up to sit down at the right hand of God. But there's another appearance. And after this, he appeared to Stephen. You remember in Acts 7, when Peter was being stoned, and Peter looked up, and he saw Jesus standing on the right hand of God, and he made the statement, I see him that is there. Then in the 13th appearance is when he appeared to Paul. And that's what Paul says again in 1 Corinthians 15, 8 through 10. And he said, and last of all, as to a child untimely born, he appeared unto me. So you remember back in Acts, the 9th chapter, Jesus was on the road to Damascus, and the light shone out of heaven, and Paul looked up, and here we're told he saw Jesus. So the Apostle Paul said, he's the last one. He said, and I saw him, and I can bear witness. So you remember, as we've talked about witnesses, or somebody that has to be a first-hand witness, they have to see. And Paul says, I actually saw him. Now, he not only saw him, but he talked to him. And what was it that he asked him? He said, who art thou, Lord? Remember that? And then how was the answer? I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. See? What do you have me to do? And he told him what he'd have him to do. But in all, there are 13 appearances that our Lord made after he raised from the dead, showing by many infallible proofs that he's the same one that was killed and put in the tomb that he raised from the dead. So John started his gospel with deity coming from earth, living life as a man, dying on that cross, being raised, and then showing himself to be alive in all these ways. And ended by saying, you have all the proof that you need to understand that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay, with that, we bring our class in John to a conclusion. So, see you next fall if you want to. How many of you want to do